to angles and special angle pairs notes. So angle basics. An angle is formed by two rays with a common endpoint, called the vertex of the angle. The sides of the angle are, in this case, ray AB and ray AC. Now their shared endpoint, the vertex, is A. There's a couple ways of naming angles. One way is using three letters. So, for example, BAC. Now you want this notation here to indicate that it is an angle, and you always want your vertex in the middle if you are using three letters. So BAC is one, CAB is another. Your vertex has to be in the middle when you're naming it. You can also sometimes use only one letter to name your angle. In this case, since this angle is by itself, there's nothing else to worry about, we can just call this angle A. It's going to be your vertex, whatever that is. If you are able to use the one-letter way, that's what it is. So looking down here, we want to name all the angles here using three letters. So first we've got this one up top here. So we can name that BAB. Again, we always want our vertex in the middle. We have this lower one here, DAC. And for each of these, we could reverse it too, like you could do DAB, CAD. We also have the outer one, the big one, so BAC. We can't use the one letter to name these because basically there's multiple angles at vertex A. Multiple angles use vertex A. So in this case, we couldn't just say, oh, angle A, because it could be talking about this one, it could be talking about this one, or it could be talking about the big one. So when we have a situation like this where there are multiple angles that could be using the same vertex, we have to use a three-letter version. It's only in a situation like this where there's nothing else to confuse us that we can use the one letter. So an angle lies in the plane and creates three separate parts: the angle interior, the angle exterior, and the points along the two rays that form the angle. So name the label point that is interior to PQR, shown to angle PQR. So angle PQR is the one on the outside, and an interior point to that would be S, because that's the point inside it. Name the label point that is exterior to angle PQS. So PQS is the skinny one on top. Exterior means it's not inside